So what does this black ex-slave Nicholas Biddle and these white guys of the Washington Artillery have in common? And what makes their relationship the blueprint for how we should treat outcasts in our society today? And how did their unique bond enable Nicholas to become the first person to shed blood in the Civil War? In this video, we will explore these fascinating connections by discussing how the heroic Washington Artillerists embraced fellow hero Nicholas Biddle as one of their own amid a society steeped in racism. We will also visit the monument erected by the appreciative townsfolk of Pottsville, Pennsylvania, in honor of Nicholas and his fellow artillerists. Hi, my name is Todd, and welcome to Heroes of Humanity, where we identify, celebrate, and strive to emulate the sung and unsung heroes among us. Let's watch the video. In April of 1861, the Confederates attacked Fort Sumter, and this kicked off the Civil War between the North and the South. And Abraham Lincoln immediately called for people, for regiments, for soldiers to come to Washington, D.C. to protect the capital. Now, Nicholas Biddle and the Washington Artillery were some of the first people to arrive. So let's read the article about Nicholas and his friends in the article called Nicholas Biddle, The Civil War's First Blood by John D. Hoptack. Just days after Fort Sumter, a pro-Confederate mob in Maryland turned ex-slave Nicholas Biddle into the war's first casualty. Niger in uniform, Niger in uniform, screamed the agitated Baltimore crowd of Southern sympathizers. They had been angry enough when Pennsylvania militiamen had detrained at Bolton Street Station and began marching down Utah Street toward Camden Station on April 18, 1861. But when they saw Nicholas Biddle, an African American in uniform who was treated as an equal by his white comrades, their bloodlust just only increased and their calls grew louder. Poor Nick had to take it as the mob closed in like wild wolves, Captain James Wren, Biddle's commander, later reported. Biddle soon became the target of more than just oaths, as salvos of bricks pried loose from the streets began to fly through the air. One struck Biddle in the head, knocking him to the ground and leaving a wound that reportedly exposed bone. Many Pennsylvanians present that day believed Biddle was the first person to shed blood in the Civil War at the hands of an enemy combatant. Regardless of who shed first blood in what would be the bloodiest of all American wars, it seems strange that Biddle remains an overlooked and almost entirely forgotten figure in the Civil War's rich history. At the time, however, Biddle received the attention of Abraham Lincoln as the president visited the militiamen being billeted at the U.S. Capitol on April 19th. Lincoln wanted to thank the men who had arrived to defend Washington only 4 days after he called for 75,000 volunteers to quell the rebellion that began with the attack on Fort Sumter on April 12th. The president learned the Pennsylvanians had been attacked while traveling through Baltimore en route to the capital. Private Ingance Gresser, a native of Germany, suffered from a painful ankle wound, and Private David Jacobs had a fractured left wrist and a few broken teeth. But it was the frail 65-year-old Biddle, wearing the uniform of the Washington Artillery, his head wrapped in blood-soaked bandages, who especially caught Lincoln's attention. Biddle refused the president's advice to seek medical attention. insisting that he preferred to remain with his company. The Pennsylvanians were the first of the volunteers to arrive in the District of Columbia and will go down in the history as the first defenders. Their Baltimore injuries occurred as the men arrived for the final leg of their journey from Pennsylvania to Washington. The entire police force, the Baltimore police force, had been summoned to escort the volunteers through the streets. But even the police had a difficult time controlling the raucous crowd of 2,000, which jeered the anxious militiamen while hurraying for Jefferson Davis and the Southern Confederacy. As the volunteers arrived at Camden Station, they were pelted with stones, bricks, bottles, and whatever else the local mob could reach. Some were even clubbed or knocked down by a few well-landed punches. A few bolder Confederate sympathizers lunged at the unarmed Pennsylvanians with knives and drawn pistols. First defender Heber Thompson wrote that one man was caught dumping gunpowder on the floor of one of the train's cars in the hope that a soldier carelessly striking a match in the darkened interior would blow himself and his comrades to perdition. For the idealistic volunteers from Pottsville, Allentown, Reading, and Lewistown, the ordeal quickly erased any romanticized notions of soldiering they might have had. Biddle's injuries were the most serious, an irony considering he wasn't technically a soldier since the federal government would not muster him in because of his race. Now, that's just a footnote. Lincoln later changed that after the Emancipation Proclamation, and he enabled black soldiers to fight for the North. So, picking up with the article again. Biddle, however, had willingly marched off to war as the orderly of Captain Wren, the Washington Artillerists commanding officer. He had been a part of the company since its founding in 1840, and because the other members of the unit regarded him so highly, they gave him a uniform. Nick Biddle, however, did not accompany Wren when the 48th left Schuylkill County in September 1861. He remained in Pottsville, still nursing a painful head wound he had suffered in Baltimore. Biddle spent the rest of his life in Pottsville, performing odd jobs until he began to suffer from rheumatism. As he grew older and more infirm, he couldn't perform any labor. Despite being a wounded veteran, he could not draw a federal pension because he had never been mustered in. Impoverished in his final years, he walked the streets of Pottsville seeking charity. Pottsville's leading newspaper, the Miners' Journal, appealed to the community for help. Quote, "The surviving veterans of the Washington Artillery and the National Light Infantry once again answered the call. Agreeing to pay for the cost, they arranged Biddle's funeral, which took place just 2 days after his death. A large crowd gathered in front of Biddle's home, and then, as the drum corps played, began the solemn procession up Minersville Street to the colored burying ground adjacent to the Bethel AME Church. And we'll go to that burial ground here at the end of the video if you're interested in seeing some pics of that. After the sermon at the cemetery, a number of uniformed first defenders carried the simple coffin to the burial site and laid Nicholas Biddle to rest. The surviving first defenders contributed $1 each to pay for a tombstone upon which was inscribed, "In memory of Nicholas Biddle, who died on August 2nd, 1876, age 80 years. His was the proud distinction of shedding the first blood in the late war for the Union, being wounded while marching through Baltimore with the first volunteers from Schuylkill County, April 18th, 1861, erected by his friends in Pottsville. Well, that was really a moving story of Nicholas Biddle and his white artillerist friends, and how they befriended him to the very end. And he came out to try to help him toward the end of his life when he was old and feeble. But more importantly, they took him in as one of their own in a society where blacks and other less desirables were ostracized by society. And so that is just the point I want to make in this video. How can we, in the 21st century, have such an impact? Well, we can take people in that are ostracized by society. Those who are not accepted based on their character, but are rejected based on their race, religion, or what have you. So think of ways you can do that. Inviting someone over to your house, taking someone out to eat, just befriending them any way you can. So I hope you like this video, and if you do like it, hit the like button. And we do appreciate your support when you subscribe to this channel. It helps support this channel and the goals that we have. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to now play the video clips from our visit to Nicholas Biddle's church. And we're also going to play the clips of where we visited the grave site, his grave site around back. But keep in mind the big monument that they put there, gravestone that they put there, that John Haptak, I just read from John Haptak when he talked about what was inscribed on that. Well, that got destroyed, it got vandalized. But the new one, the simpler one, is still there. So we're also going to go into the town square and look at the monument that the townspeople of Pottsville placed there in honor of the white artillerist and Nicholas Biddle. I think you'll find the inscription on that fascinating. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Okay, here we are at the Bethel AME Church, where Nicholas Biddle went to church and where he was buried. We'll go around back and see if we can't find his grave. Okay. As I look at the inscription here, a thought just came to my mind. First to shed blood in the Civil War. Talking about being unsung and forgotten. It's in a nondescript grave, and in one sense, graveyard, I should say. And it's like in a rundown part of town. And you see a lot of trash outside and so forth. Anyway, it's kind of ironic. Here we are at the monument, the foot of the monument. And you can read there, in memory of the first defenders, and Nicholas Biddle of Pottsville, first man to shed blood in the Civil War, April 18th, 1861, erected by the citizens of Pottsville, April 18th, 1951. So Nicholas and his friends were well remembered. What's it say here? Love, honor, renown, and lasting remembrance for those who fought for freedom and an imperiled country. May posterity profit by their example. It's hard to read this here, and I think that is Latin, so I'll leave that untranslated. But I didn't know they had Nicholas Biddle's name. Of all the people that were involved in this, his is the only name that makes it on this plaque in City Square.